Alrighty. The wings make up the various lettered megacorporations that form the city. Each are needlessly powerful with ridiculous influence throughout the city as a whole. However, there hasn't been such a formally dominant affair such as the L Corp, R Corp, T Corp, and W Corp collaboration, that of which made them an entirely domineering force unmatched within the city for a time. That time is over, with the subject of today's video being at particular risk, W Corp. District 23, belonging to W Corp, is one of those locations we've gotten plenty of lore for. Whether it be the Streets of Flavor or Warp Trains, this part of the city is dripping with details and colourful characters. Heck, if anything, this corporation has been one of Project Moon's earlier featured creations, even showing up just a smidge in Lobotomy Corp. Gebera's department features this funny little W over here, wherein it is told to us that rabbits teleported in at least. Anyhow, since we've got an entire district to cover today, I suppose we ought to start from the bottom. The backstreets of District 23 are a fairly unsavory affair, with a turbo hyperfixation on flavor. While a good chunk of it is centered around one specific part of the backstreets coined as the Streets of Flavor, nothing is exactly off limits in terms of culinary pursuits. Yes, this is the cannibal sector. Somehow, despite all the random taboos that make human life worth more from the head, cannibalism is A-OK in the city, with plenty of representation within District 23. Of notable participants in this affair, we've got Pierre and Jack specifically, who run their own little bistro within the backstreets, with plenty to say on the subject of human meat. Anyhow, due to this hyperfixation with flavor and nonchalant approach to human ingredients, the backstreets of District 23 are often cited as exceedingly dangerous. After all, a random syndicate could pull you off the streets, not just for trafficking, but instead for sale as an ingredient. Not exactly a fate worse than death, but well, the thought of being consumed isn't exactly appealing to a vast majority of people. Conveniently, the Streets of Flavor are apparently super close to W Corp HQ, so there's a non-zero chance that the agents partake in the unique cuisine as well. Speaking of though, District 23's main reputation lies in Warp Corporation. They provision the district's primary export, rather their most well-known service in Warp Trains. Thanks to W Corp's portal singularity, you can go from one side of the city to the other in 10 seconds flat. This creates a bloody dreamy public transport system for those with access to it. And well, every district is said to have at least one Warp Express station to boot, meaning access isn't exactly a problem at all. Though expensive and seemingly tantamount to your average airfare rather than a train ticket, with first class and economy offerings, the claim seems to more or less ring true with an almost perfect track record. The speed of the service, alongside its reliability in past, had turned it into something of a giant in the industry, all but making most forms of public transports for the middle class rather obsolete, at least for those that can afford it. Taking a Warp Express train feels like it would be an entire package affair. Just look at how pretty the stations look. They're all styled to each district's sensibilities, and supposedly held in high regard within each. It really is a seemingly idyllic technology, being able to portal entire trains all around the city. Just imagine all of the logistical benefits inherent in such. Heck, this would be a convincing enough argument for city logistics to be rather utopian if it carried packages and supplies as well. Regardless, all of this wouldn't be possible without collaboration with different wings. Since W Corp has a foothold in pretty much every district, there ought to be a few interested parties that would like to work with them. To this end, R Corp provides the nest a level of security, L Corp prior provided them with energy, and T Corp had something to do with the trains themselves to boot. Essentially, this formed something of an energy, transportation, and security conglomerate for a time. Though this has since fallen apart with L Corp's demise, alongside more recent issues with warp trains. Alright, enough beating around the bush and making this corporation's sales pitch for them. We've had missing passengers. A lot of missing passengers. Public trust in Warp Express trains has fallen drastically as news of missing passengers has come to fruition. It seems absurd. 10 seconds in and out, yet there were missing folks from economy to first class, the whole shebang. Such news is disastrous, especially as it is all but impossible to explain. I reckon the corporation had no bloody idea what even went wrong in this case, and well, who could blame them, considering it all revolved around the library's shenanigans. Anyhow, let's put a pin in that for a moment and speak on the actual runnings of the corporation and the trains. W Corp's reality is a closely guarded secret that has allowed it to cut many corners in its running. Warp trains are the result of two singularities rather than one. The one that resembles the portal-style shenanigans was bought from another former corporation at a huge premium. However, such portal tunneling has a rather horrifying side effect. Rather than going from point A to point B in one go, like one would reasonably expect, it's closer to going from point A to point B to point C, with point B being a parallel dimension with severe time dilation. Instead of 10 seconds, you are subject to tens of thousands of years, in something of a temporal stasis, during which you do not thirst, you do not hunger, you do not tire, and of course, you do not die. Your consciousness unfortunately remains perfectly intact, though allegedly none of your time is actually passing thanks to T Corp's meddling aboard these trains. This is something of a fate worse than death, and results in some very abhorrent happenings on these trains. Notably, as passengers lose sanity, they start self-mutilating, resorting to violence, and God knows whatever levels of depravity in order to feel something and otherwise pass the time. There's plenty of body horror on display in one instance of warp train operations we are privy to, but again, we'll be getting there. So what's there to prevent these amalgams and horrifying piles of biomass from then spilling over into the city? Well, that comes in the form of the W Corp cleanup agents. When warp trains arrive at their stations after their thousands of years and 10-second jaunt, they are settled at the station for a moment, and assigned a designation based on the conditions within said train. These are unobstructed for those that only require standard cleanup, delayed if they must suppress active passengers, congested if standard issue gears aren't enough, or if rare enemies have popped up, cancelled if grade 1 fixer equivalents are required, and finally, derailed. If a train is derailed, W Corp is unable to process said train on their own. Speaking of, what exactly does cleanup entail? How does W Corp turn the biomass arriving in their stations back into the passengers that started with it? Well, therein comes their real singularity: restoration. This singularity allows them to reset an entity to a previous state. Essentially, it's resetting to a saved state or point in function. The warp train saves the state of its passengers during departure and assists in its restoration upon arrival. Agents follow the data and on-site conditions to return passenger biomass to their seats before hitting the singularity's restore function in order to turn all that body horror and viscera back to normal, purging all those memories and troublesome conscious breaks, alongside any bothersome repercussions that would have otherwise occurred. It's honest work, I suppose, though it requires a degree of combat finesse in order to perform competently. As per most Corp agents, they range in level from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. In terms of agents we're privy to, there's quite a few of them, both in characters and Sinner IDs. From Ruiner, we've got Rose, Sen, and Lesty. As for Sinners, we've got Yisang, Faust, Don, Ryoshu, Musou, Hongers, Otis, and Heathcliff, all of various differing levels to boot. W Corp has some of the most gameplay content throughout Project Moon's works, and is largely based around charge. Alright, it's worth mentioning you can avoid all of the above tribulations and several millennia mind break by purchasing a first class ticket. They give you some refreshments, treat you like a VIP, then freeze you in a cryopod. You skip the existential nightmare, and it is truly that 10-second in and out experience. Pure blissful ignorance for the rich anyhow. That would be until those pesky rumors of first class passengers going missing started going. Was there any basis for those? Well, unfortunately, yes. Let's talk about the biggest warp train incident, specifically the events of warp train UW212, wherein these disappearances were most prevalent. There's a few notable characters on board, but we'll start with our point of view fellas for this first little chapter. The Muller office, featuring Olga, Mika, and Rain. They board the train as normal, finding their seats and slapping on their seatbelts. There's a pair of lovebirds on board, Tommy and Mary. They're flirting quite happily as the train counts down to depart in 10 minutes. Regardless, the Muller office members ruminates on the need for seatbelts, citing that perhaps it's something of a courtesy. Besides, it'll be 10 seconds in and out, right? Olga proceeds to pass out before the train shoots off, but wakes up an hour later into something of a troublesome state of affairs. It's been more than 10 seconds, but the train hasn't arrived yet. There's a few complaints here and there, but ultimately nothing can be done about it, so they wait. 6 hours pass, and anxieties start running high, and they start getting a lot more antsy. 17 hours pass now, and well, there's clearly something very wrong, prompting the Muller office to tear off their seatbelts. And finally, far as this perspective goes, 31 hours pass and the Muller office has had enough. They've realized that something abnormal is going on right now, especially with their lack of thirst, hunger, or tiredness. As the rest of the passengers are on edge and the situation seems to be boiling out of control, the office members pull out something of a gamble and sign an invitation to the library, flipping them away from the time-dilated dimensional mess and future horrors to follow. I reckon dying in the library is a better fate than what awaits Tommy and Mary later on, but regardless, here's our first set of missing passengers from economy class. Our next proper glimpse into Warp Train UW212 returns to the perspective of Tommy and Mary. They've been coping with their journey through extended sleep and each other's company. A new passenger, Elena, pipes up and tells them it's been 10 days into the journey. They discuss the runnings of the trains, how it was only supposed to be 10 seconds. How did things come to this? That kind of rhetoric. Elena outs themselves as a nurse and introduces Dr. Jae-hyun, who seems to have been looking after Tommy during his earlier extended sleep. They begin discussing the details, pushing through each of the pain points one by one. The lack of response from W Corp, as fatal as this incident would be to their image. There's been no response at all, meaning either something has gone horrifically wrong or things are working as intended, the latter being a rather dark prospect. Next, the lack of thirst or hunger. Despite being out for 3 days straight, there was no change in Tommy's physical state, at least in terms of vital functions. Everyone is as healthy as they were when they got on board. Even with the facts laid out though, there was nothing they can do. Even the Muller office, having tried to bust through the doors, was incapable of such, meaning they're functionally locked into this box of a carriage. Thus, they wait. 5 days later, the conditions have gone from bad to worse, as sanity begins to crumble. The carriage next to them seems to have some commotion. More specifically, a passenger has gone ahead and slit their own throats to the tune of "Watch me, witness me," and they're not dead. Despite losing their throats, it hangs out, and yet they live. The sight is enough to cause Tommy to faint multiple times. The day after, Elena and Tommy discuss the events along Jae-hyun. The suicidal maniac had been quarantined, but his blood didn't so much as splatter, so much as coagulate and refuse to separate fully from his body, resulting in a terrifying cohesive mass of corpse dweller. Jae-hyun says they ought to brace themselves, that this is only the beginning. We fast forward to 30 days in. Mary has been communicating with the other carriages, bringing over news that 5 of the 30 carriages have already had suicidal breaks. Their carriage, number 7, is holding on mainly from the strong will and support of Elena and Jae-hyun. Mary's thoughts go a bit dark, thinking on the grim reality that may have faced them if it weren't for those two. Tommy tries his best to reassure her, and now we skip to 93 days in. Things go from their already sorted state to even worse. Of the carriages still in any proper capacity to operate, carriages 5 to 15 remain in solidarity, or anything beyond 15 is not looking good. They've long started believing in pain to pass this trial of theirs, and started spreading it around, playing with one another's bodies like toys. Pain is just something for them to feel, as is any resemblance of feeling at all, I suppose. That said, the solidarity is starting to break, as people fear for their family and loved ones on board. Elena and Jae-hyun offer a solution, but only with the consent of those who wish to undertake such a procedure. Tommy and Mary are apprehensive at first, not sure what to expect, but their love for one another makes them increasingly more desperate. Elena's words ring though. You must be prepared to fight them, the vile people from beyond Carriage 15, who are trying to break us apart. Day 100. Members of the carriage have undergone Jae-hyun's procedure. Tommy is perturbed, but Mary is surprisingly calm. Though initially shocked if she can be with Tommy forever, it wouldn't be so bad, right? Tommy takes a while longer to convince, but by day 113 he gives in and takes Jae-hyun's procedure. The raids by other carriages reaching number 14 boiled over the decision. Both Tommy and Mary confirm their commitment to one another, and the procedure goes underway immediately. 120 days in, just a week later, we get a glimpse into the two after the procedure. They can feel each other's heartbeats. Oh, that's cute. They must be really close to one another now. We fast forward an entire month from there to day 150. The procedure seems to have kept the carriage safe as the passengers rejoice. They thank the doc and nurse for their new bodies, but they're exaggerating surely. It's all because of their love after all. Suddenly though, carriage 10 is under attack and well, the ones sent are none other than Tommy and Mary to handle the situation. They may be inexperienced in fighting, but at this point, their affection is what's keeping them together, right? Well, yes, I suppose that is what's keeping them together. Day 3437, almost 9 years later. Tommy and Mary have become exceedingly competent at dealing with threats. They've become heroes. The heroes of Lovetown. It is at this point that their form is finally revealed to us, and, well, body horror is the least of our worries, I suppose. Almost 10 years have passed in the train, and the only remaining sane ones are Jae-hyun and Elena. Tommy and Mary have long lost any semblance of normalcy, all but embracing the horrors of drifting in the void, unable to die, thirst, hunger, or tire. Next we see is 724,284 days into the journey. After almost 2,000 years, Tommy and Mary's consciousness has all but melded into one, becoming a resident of Lovetown simply known as Tomeri. The almost 2 millennia of tribulations has reduced their sanity to next to zero, with them regressing to an almost infantile state. Here we see them questioning if they should fold lumps of blood into squares or triangles, even calling Elena mommy and referring to Jae-hyun as daddy. It is at this point that Elena hands out an invitation to the library, finally allowing Tomeri to be free of this fate worse than death. Though they've changed so much at this point, that well, the best that could happen to them now is to be put out of their misery, I suppose. The library does just that for a time, leading to their retention as a book. While we can't impose them over our librarians as a key page, their combat pages end up being exceedingly potent under the right conditions. Past year, Jae-hyun is seen waltzing into first class and enacting a plan of his own. His sanity was retained by some nondescript procedure from Pluto, making it feel like only a week had passed. Regardless, he starts making puppets of the passengers here, shipping them off to the library as well, as he lectures to the air of the pure insanity of the train's happenings and the city's injustices. Such regards the fates of the first-class passengers anyhow. Beyond there, we cycle back to the city proper. Now with the train arriving after its 10-second journey. As mentioned prior with W Corp's procedures, Rose, Sen, and Lesty, W Corp cleanup agents, board the train to perform their duties. They're all cut short though, as they discover that passengers are missing. More importantly, that first class has gone missing, and whatever time quota was owed to T Corp hasn't been fulfilled. Here we learn that W Corp can go through the happenings of the trains during transits, at least in areas of dense emotional flux. The agents get a glimpse at Jae-hyun and Elena's handiwork, and ultimately get sent to the library themselves. Now you might be wondering, what happened to those booked by the library since Angela ultimately decided to let it all go? Well, you see, I think this image will more or less tell you. Anyhow, thanks to this specific incident, the happenings of Train UW212, W Corp's decline began in earnest. Between the incident causing reduced revenue in first-class ticket sales, energy prices hiking due to Lobotomy Corp's fall, W Corp has definitely seen better days. Worse even, the cleanup agents are only getting more and more overworked, due to many factors contributing to additional train loads in the economy class cabins. All that to say, W Corp's days are numbered, and well, it's only getting worse with the new aspirant W Corp nipping at their heels. Speaking of, Wayfarer Company. What is more convenient than a train that can teleport you across the city? Well, a door that simply lets you walk through it and land somewhere else entirely. Wayfarer Company aims to replace the crumbling W Corp with this kind of technology. Not that we entirely know the price of said tech. As far as we see, it's rather seamless, essentially being a no-frills portal that gets you from point A to point B without a point C to be concerned about. That said, nothing in the city is ever truly free. To take over W Corp, they're going to need to start a war. Well, there's a few things pointing towards that potentially being the second smoke war in practice, but we'll see when we get there. W Corp is in freefall, and Wayfarer Company is on the up and up, with their corridors, backdoors, and portals far outshining the likes of whole trains. Anyhow, that about wraps up W Corp's lore, but what of its residents and denizens? As one of the locations we get a lot of insights into, there's actually quite a few colourful characters that stem from District 23, whether from the backstreets or Nest itself. Starting at the bottom of the totem pole, we've got the members of the Hook office in Taeyeon, McCullen, and Naoki. As their namesake, they're a bunch of fixers that use hook-like bionic weapons to go about their day-to-day. They're a very low-level bunch, more a collection of rats than a proper office, but they do what they must. At this particular level, it's ruminated that they're not all too different from a syndicate, really, strong-arming their way through matters and occasionally pulling off stunts for attention. That said, their pages give us insight into the lower end of backstreet life, and a few bits here and there on workshops. Not all too much to glean regarding District 23 from this trio. These fellas are among the very first to get booked by the library. Moving upwards in the world, we've got Pierre and Jacques from the Streets of Flavor. They're an oddball duo of cannibalistic chefs that give us insights into the darker side of said Streets of Flavor. Pierre's page is rather dreamy about the unique flavors and experiences when it comes to taste, It's a real typical fine dining mentality that I'm personally not a fan of, since grub is grub and making it more of an experience shouldn't quintuple its price tag, but I digress. I've seen too much wasteful luxury in my time working at a casino. Anyhow, as for Jack, he talks of the supply chain, wherein syndicates hand over or trade bodies to a duo, alongside ruminating over the quality of meat. Unfortunately for both Pierre and Jack, though, their two best suppliers in the musicians of Bremen and Little Piggies have decidedly stopped trading with them, resulting in them needing to create their own supply chain. Regardless, the two enjoy each other's company, but ultimately get booked. As for the other notable fellow from District 23, well, Kali, otherwise known as the Red Mist. Okay, obligatory guitar riff aside, she's one of the most dense characters lore-wise, rising from an orphan with a strong will and sense of justice into a colored fixer of incomparable strength. Simply known as the strongest, the Red Mists protected Lobotomy Corporation during their time in the outskirts, researching their projects. She clashes against the Head's forces, dying in the process of protecting as many as she could from their assault on the researchers. While there's far more to Kali, I'd be doing her a disservice covering her here in brief, so perhaps she'll get a video of her own someday. That or all the colored fixers are going to get shoved into one. Past there, it's worth mentioning notable W Corp agents. We've got quite a few, though most of them are rather brief in their stories. Rose, Lesty, and Sen, as we covered earlier, are the agents who boarded Train UW212 after its arrival. Rose is their leader, calling the shots as they board, and discover the remnants of the train and its missing passengers. Her page regards W Corp's restoration singularity and the after effects of such technology's usage, mainly commenting on the slight inconsistencies in its deployment. You may gain a bit of weight or height, but no one really pays enough attention to chalk it as more than a matter of feel, like elation making you feel lighter or heavier after a meal. In addition, she mentions the memory restoration details, that of which not being selective, but simply the restoration to a prior point erasing everything. Allegedly, the restoration is so seamless that the flow of conversation and thought is preserved almost entirely to boot. As for Lesty, well, here they get bonus points being from District 23 to boot. She doubles down on the singularity, being a bit fickle and needing people to stay still for the scanning process. It makes her job easier, after all. Aside from that, she really seems to enjoy using the restoration singularity. That said, her page regards a very funky story, wherein a color fixer snuck onto a warp train once. Normally, they're supposed to be in first class and frozen through the journey to avoid such incidents. But as the story goes on, the colored fixer starts training the passengers into an enlightened bunch and began wiping out cleanup agents, right, left, and center as they boarded for arrival procedures. Beyond that, she regards the collaboration of R Corp in warp train procedures. Seems the rabbits are called in for particularly stubborn cleanup procedures, much like them being called in to suppress a department in Lob Corp. Then comes Sen, a more trained cleanup agent anyhow. He talks on the portal-based singularity used by the warp trains, it belonging to a fallen wing and all that. He also goes over T-Corp's involvement with matters. Seems they employ temporal preservation while harvesting people's time for their own singularity, the reality being that a single second hasn't actually passed for those within as time is collected. Regardless, this makes T-Corp and W Corp exceedingly good business partners. Here, they also specify that the tech used to create portals is also used for their rip space armaments, the gear they use to precisely tear and cut biomass to pieces prior to restoration. As for Sinner IDs, most of them are exceedingly short, as they're quite old at this point. I'll be brief with a good chunk of them, since they're ultimately just corpos. Don Quixote, this time as a level 3 cleanup agent. He regards mostly her induction, her fantasies, and finally her disconcertment and disgust upon boarding her first train for cleanup. Rather short, but did give us this endlessly memed piece of art. Faust is only a level 2 cleanup agent in comparison. Her story regards very forced things for lack of a better term. She's gaining information for the express sake of wanting to know all of the city. She ruminates on the nature of W Corp's singularity, but otherwise that's it really. Nothing we don't already know. Musso is another level 2 cleanup agent, mostly resembling Sen from Ruiner. It's a stupid short. Musso doing Musso things. Okay, really, these first three are the sinners just doing as they please, but with slightly W Corp flavored backgrounds, I guess. Musso is just stoically doing his duty as a cleanup agent, while a teammate complains he doesn't chat enough. He simply replies back that a reply isn't demanded of him. The stranger does not care. Roshu is another level 3 and ties back a bit to her past with corporism and art, so to speak. She talks on matters of creating arts, how the resulting passengers are some form of art, the art of others, etc. Once again, it's very surface level Sinner, but now placed in a corporation kind of affair. Nothing groundbreaking or all too interesting. Hongers is another level 2 agent. Here we at least get some character interaction between him and Roshu. They're off work and dining out, calling back to Roshu's training of some of the new employees. He goes on about the freshness from training newbies, especially the reaction from newbies when they learn of the train's reality. Roshu finds it a bit distasteful and parts ways with him, somewhat regretting her current responsibilities. As for Hongers afterwards, well, as with above, so is below. We get Hongers feeling like he's just going with the flow, drifting along, so to speak, to the elder's whims. He does mention Dawn in passing as she joined alongside him and rose up the ranks past him already. Either way, seems like the Jade Boy is stuck in a rut, and well, that was that at that point. Very Hongers-like. Yusung is another level 3 agent, and likewise another bloody short one. Man is El Depresso on public transport, I suppose. He waxes poetic about the situation he finds himself in, more or less dying like your average wagey and questioning life, whether it is just more work after work, so to speak. We get a glimpse of him at work as well, but still waxing more poetic, and finally the transport stops and he goes about the rest of his day. Once again, as above, so below, nothing that interesting to glean here. Otis is, say it with me, another level 3 agent. However, this time, she is at least a captain. The story has Yi-sung, Roshu, and herself go about cleanup duties on a rather troublesome train. Seems the passengers have founded a kingdom of sorts, similar to the story told by Sen to Lesty when they arrive at the library. The trio talk on the odd uptick in trains with jank such as this one, before Roshu mentions the incidents of UW212. Otis hushes them and collects her thoughts on what may have transpired aboard. Of course, she has no full way of knowing compared to us. Plus, there's our first cluing in that they're inevitably going to start getting overworked. Funny enough, we've learned that the Cleanup Agent Manual has clauses for factionalized trains, and they take an average of an hour to clear out. From there, we get plenty of details as to their cleanup duty, and a breakdown as to the ways a factionalized train ends up being worked. We get Otis showing off her capability for a bit, before going back into drill sergeant mode. As above, so below, we get Otis's personalizations in the form of, well, mentioning to the Odyssey. The return journey is always so far, and so unforgiving, so she ends off on. Heathcliff is a level 4 agent. Finally, something new. This one is quite long and pretty damn rough, all things considered. With W Corp beginning its inevitable fall, cleanup teams are being heavily overworked in order to keep up with demand. Heathcliff is working with Hongers on a pretty nasty job, wherein a fixer is attempting to fight to the bitter end with high-quality workshop gears, specifically Corey Workshop, as Hongers points out. Top shelf stuff. They unfortunately find out their opponent was only a grade 4. Well, grade 2 with a stupid amount of penalty points to make her a grade 4 in title only. Here we get a look at some of the more advanced gear W Corp has on offer for its agents. In this case, the CCA, which Heathcliff employs. A rather potent exosuits for tougher jobs. Past there, we get a few work stories. Matters concerning W Corp's service decline and the reality of first-class tickets. They don't actually make that much for them. Rather, the emotions and time harvest lost is rather painful for their bottom line. Aside from that, we hear about some index proxies and even a capo of the FUM having boarded at some point, making for the trains being a bit of a dangerous investment now. Back to an earlier point, CCAs, otherwise known as congestion clearing armors, are stupid expensive gear that can only be used by exceedingly competent level 4 agents. They used to be utilized to take on other external matters, but are simply thrown together for taking on troublesome passengers now. Beyond that, we actually learn of the train classifications here: unobstructed, delayed, congested, cancelled, and derailed accordingly. CCAs can be deployed to the congested ones and above, since the threat level is potentially quite high. That said, a new congested train has arrived, and well, there aren't any level 5 agents to handle it, leaving the burden to Heathcliff and whoever else is around. Since Heathcliff is the only agent able to sortie who can handle such a threat, he has no choice but to do some overtime, telling Hongers to go first. A level 2 agent, after all, has no business dealing with a congested threat. That about sums up District 23, the Streets of Flavor, and its overseeing corporation W Corp. Body horror, existential horror, and plenty more pretty much sum up the underbelly of such luxurious convenience in the warp train service. Even though they are a falling wing, there's a rather rich history and lore to them, dating all the way back to W Corp even, and well, these guys make for some fantastic stories within the city. While I kinda wish we got more to chew on now, with Wayfarer Company in the midst of matters, we'll have that to look forward to, I reckon, rather than, well, another swath of W Corp IDs. Though perhaps someday we'll get a level 5 agents. That would be pretty cool to see. Once again, thanks for listening into another lore dive. These have been more refreshing to do compared to ID reviews and gameplay analysis. There's quite a lot of meat to chew on to still with these, since we haven't even broken into fixers or their associations yet, let alone some of the other districts. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and if you want to see more in the future, subscribe to the channel. Going beyond that, you can support via Patreon and Ko-Fi like Artie and Derp over there. Thanks for tuning in, or otherwise using me as second monitor content. Appreciate it.